Hi there, Steve Kaufman here. Today I'm going to talk about the rules of grammar, how we learn them, my views on learning grammar. Remember, if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe. Also, since there was an election in France today and the centrist candidate Emmanuel Macron won, I'm going to follow this with a summary of the same basic content in French for those of you who are learning French. Grammar. Rules of grammar. How do we learn them? My view, I refer back to there's a famous Sufi. Sufi is a philosophy, a branch of Islam. I don't know that much about it, but there is a saying that says you can only learn what you already know. Now, what I find with grammar, because I've exposed myself now to, I don't know how many hundreds of hours of Greek, I am now starting to look at a grammar book because as I look at this grammar book, I see a bunch of explanations that refer to things that I have already experienced and to some extent already know, although some things I don't quite notice while I'm listening. And so this grammar review helps me to realize just how the language is working, to notice how it's working. But this would only make sense to me if I've already had this massive exposure to grammar, and that is always my approach. And I recommend this series, Essential Grammar, which exists for Italian, for French, and for many other languages, put out by Dover. You can Google for it. Because what you want in a grammar book, by the way, where they didn't find them, I bought this book here when I was in Prague, Czech grammar. And what you want in a grammar book is you want it to be small as possible, because you're going to have to go there over and over again, flip through it, again, look at things that you read, understood, forgot, go back in again. As you gain more experience with the language, more and more of these rules refer to things that you have experienced, that you understand. It helps you understand, notice things when you're watching. And so a grammar book should have no, in my opinion, of course, should have no exercises. Forget the exercises. Too many language books mix everything up. You've got some learning content, some grammar explanations, some grammar examples, and some exercises. All you want, in my opinion, is an essence of the grammar with enough examples so that you can sense what they're talking about. And ideally, you go to the grammar book after you've had, you can have an initial review of the grammar because it won't make much sense to you. They'll talk about things that are going to happen in the language that you haven't experienced it, so it has very little impact, but then you go back again and again. And that is why, contrary to many language learners, I'm not a great fan of Assimil, although I have bought Assimil books in the past, and I used the Russian one. I found the Korean one too boring, and I have not really yet delved into these because I'm not that motivated to. Because what Assimil does is it mixes up content, and in the case of Russian, they had very good content, but without enough repetition, which is what we have in our mini stories, where within each story, the vocabulary repeats and the patterns repeat. And then, of course, many of these within a series of stories, 5, 10, 15, 20 stories, we focus in on a particular range of patterns in our mini stories. At least for the first 50 stories, we're focusing in on high-frequency verbs because the verbs are key, in my opinion. So we get more repetition insofar as content is concerned. But in Assimil, they mix in content with translation, with exercises, with grammar explanations, and I think things should be separate. Grammar, rules with examples here, content over there. And the content should be a very high degree of repetition. And on that basis, eventually, you get to understand the grammar. Now, I wanted to point out, I went and picked up somewhere, where is it now? Oh, maybe I don't have it here. An English grammar, oh, here it is. And I found a small one because I was looking for small grammar books. What happens is, the more you have heard the language, the more you're familiar with the language, when you read the grammar, the more it seems that they are describing things that are obvious, and therefore it becomes harder and harder to read the grammar explanations because it seems that they're explaining things to you that, if you stand in the rain without an umbrella, you will get wet. Okay, so that they're explaining, the functioning of the language. And if you have already acquired that through enough listening and reading, which in the case of your native language you have, then by and large, these grammar explanations are superfluous, unless there is a specific issue that you want to zoom in on, in which case you're better off to Google for it on your computer. Now, when we learn a foreign language, of course, because we don't get the same amount of exposure that the native speaker does, therefore, I think referring to the grammar book from time to time becomes useful. But the more exposure, the less you need the grammar book, except for very specific issues. There you have it. That's my take on learning the grammar rules, and I'm going to do the same thing, or more or less the same thing, see what I come up with, in French. So, thank you for listening. And I should point out that we're getting, as a result of my last video, we have quite a few volunteers for Romanian. So, over 30 languages in the mini stories where we get lots of repetition. These mini stories are proceeding, and as they become available, I will let you know. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.